All right, we're live here in Nourish, Heal, and Thrive. I'm so excited to interview David Andrew Wiebe, really special guest today. And we're always interviewing people here in the group. And so David and I met a couple weeks ago through Bump, and he's growing as a leader in Bump. And also, I just really connected with him and I wanted to bring him to the group. So, uh, David, thank you for being here. And
Yeah.
yeah, really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, Derek. It's
Yeah,
great to
so
be chatting with you again.
yeah. So we actually just chatted not too long ago. We were in another meeting, but I'm excited to get to know you a little more. So why don't you start with, you know, who you are, where you're from, what you do.
Well, the long of the short of it is, I am a Canadian who grew up in Japan. So I spent 8.5 years in Japan in the traditional or conventional school system, not international school, just public school, kindergarten. I spent, I don't know, 6 months to a year there, all the way up to grade eight. And from there, family moved back to Canada as my dad passed away, and lived in Calgary for a good long while before moving out to the West Coast. And I lived in Abbotsford for a couple of years, wandered Western Canada for a couple of years, and landed myself in Surrey, BC, Greater Vancouver. And I'll probably stick around this area because I enjoy it very much. I am a creator or creative. I've created many things, including books, music, coaching programs, and courses for musicians, largely centered on how to help or helping independent artists and creatives create the kind of lifestyle and income that they want through their careers, as that appears to be a growing challenge. Even people who are like YouTube guitarists and are known as such and have a following and get views on their videos say their income can totally be like this. And it just changes quickly from month to month and year to year. So helping people create something sustainable, but something that they really love and enjoy. And it's not just like I met a goal, but I was able to reach my dream. And I've got a Facebook group called Spark Infinity. It's exactly for those types of people, creatives and creators. Yes, I served musicians for a very long time, but our group is now home to a vast array of people, and that's the way I like it. We got poets, we've got writers, we've got actors and actresses, variety of people who are in the creative field and the entertainment industries. And it's just so good to, because I'm interviewing them all the time as well. Great to hear their stories as well.
I'm muted. So as a that's really cool. And I was an animator before I started doing all this,
Mm,
and the first half of my career was kind of like that. I was bouncing around from studio to studio, from project to project. I mean, very lucky that I was able to do that. Um, but it took, a good, 10 years before I actually landed like a staff job at a studio. So it was
mm.
really tough. And I know a lot of artists, not just animators, they go through that where they pick up a project here and a project there, but nothing really steady.
Yeah, big time. It's a challenge no matter where you come at it or what angle you come at it from. If you're an actor, then you're trying to fight for roles or audition for roles. If you're a guitar player or if you're a performing musician, then you're competing for gigs, right? And not all of them are even paying. It's like you're sometimes just competing for the hope that maybe some people will show up to the show and you get some exposure. If you're an illustrator, you now have come to this realization, I'm sure, that AI can produce pretty crazy looking stuff. It's not all amazing, it's not all perfect, but we're getting to that point where it can do pencil drawings or paintings or right? It can turn your image into something else completely, and all you got to do is prompt it. Like, I want this to be a dark themed image, or I want this to be a spring themed image, and it'll just do it for you. And so there, in a way, there's a new challenge, and in a way, there's new technology to leverage, which is kind of more so the angle that I come from. And I also know, happen to know a lot of its shortcomings, and its hype is still much greater than reality. Expectation is still much greater than reality when it comes to AI.
Yeah, I recognize that as well. Um, I always see, as a member of your Facebook group, I'm always seeing little notifications about your auth that you're an author and you have your books. You want
Mm,
to share some of your books and your wisdom with the people here in this group?
of course, I'd be happy to. That whole thing, the road to becoming a serial self-published author, now award-winning and best-selling, began with a book called The New Music Industry. And it's got my picture on it from the days when I had really long hair and in my rock and roll garb. And my whole thing was, let me be painfully transparent about everything that possibly went wrong in my music career, as well as the things that went right. And sometimes it was a little bit exaggerated. You know, I made a comment about my first girlfriend was in college. That's not quite true, but I wanted to put all the readers at ease. I wanted every reader to come to it and feel like, gee, like this guy, he's just so painfully honest that if he can do it, he can make a full-time living during doing music, then I can do it too. And that's where it all started, and that's where I wanted people to get out of that book. And it evolved from there. You know, my writing style changed. I evolved as a person. I evolved as a writer. So we talk so much about consistency in business, and that's just not how I showed up. And it probably worked against me. If I'm being perfectly honest, I can see it now. I understand it better now. But back then, it was like, I want to keep growing. I want to keep learning. I want to keep trying different things. So I would release books that were based on like free guides I have on my website, which was The Essential Guide to Music Entrepreneurship. Actually went over really well, still sells pretty well too. So it's a short guide, it's a short volume compared to a lot of my other books, and yet it's one of those that people appreciate. I put together The Essential Guide to Creative Entrepreneurship. I was, in a manner of speaking, commissioned to do that because I'm a community builder as well. And one of the communities we were building at the time, I think it was the NDYYC community. But there's been so many communities that I sometimes forget or just misplace timelines. But the NDYYC in Calgary and the founder, also, I'm a co-founder, but our other co-founder suggested that I turn the Essential Guide to Music Entrepreneurship to the creative entrepreneurship. And so I began work on that. And honestly, it came out as a completely new book because that's just kind of how I do things. But in essence, at first, it was based on let's cater to this information because it's a good information, more so to just artists and creatives generally, which is in a weird way kind of where I wound up in Spark Infinity as well. So I continued to produce books primarily for musicians looking to create success on their own terms. Start your year the right way. The Music Entrepreneur Code, the Music Entrepreneur Companion Guide. The title kind of got lost on people there, so might need to rework that one, but that's okay. I just kept producing. And eventually I decided like I want to put out some books on some different topics. Like I have a little more to say about building a music career, but I've covered it in so much detail and with so many different vignettes and angles and perspectives on what you can do to create a living that you love through music that sort of exhausted on it to a degree. I can continue to like update the books that I have and make them better. But that's when I began work on the it's over here. Yeah, the Productivity, Performance, and Profits Black Book because I knew I had something to say about productivity, having produced so many books and published so many songs personally and produced other people's music and writing thousands of blog posts, producing and publishing hundreds of podcast episodes and hundreds of videos. So I felt like that might be something that people would want, especially with people frequently coming to me and saying, "How the hell do you do it all?" And then I had a really strange unusual 2 years of wandering Western Canada after the pandemic. I just no longer had a home in Abbotsford the way things turned out. And I said, well, maybe I could live out of a Airbnbs. I've been meaning to do that, and maybe I could kind of experience this for a while. And I won't say it was like a unmitigated disaster, but that's kind of the way it eventually went. And so out of that experience came two books, Digital Nomad, No Dash Mad, and The Fairy Letters. And those two books document really the disastrous parts of those 2 years. And people might come away with the impression that I hate travel or it's always disastrous for me. It's not like that at all. It was just kind of a 2 year period where a lot of stuff was being worked out. A lot of stuff had to come tumbling down so that it could be built back up. Flashes of Elation is a book that I was promising to people for a very, very long time. Glad that I finally got to fulfill on it last year. The book spent probably about 8 years in development, and it's for sensitive creatives, also known as intuitive sensitives or sensitive intuitives. Basically, people who almost have like this extra sensory ability to feel what other people are feeling, but because of that, like their health is affected, their life is really affected. Health and finances and their creativity and all the things they want to do doesn't go that well because they're always people pleasing and trying to put other people's first and all that kind of stuff. So that book came out, and I would say, The Renegade Musician there is kind of my magnum opus on music, and it's the most recent one that I put together. And I think outside of that, I don't know if I need to or want to write another book on music business or music industry. However, I probably will continue to update and improve upon the library that I've got.
That's amazing. I have a bunch of questions, but um, the first one that's coming to mind is how do you think you found the courage to be so vulnerable and put out everything and be totally transparent in these
Mm.
books that you're writing?
Yeah, and that wasn't even necessarily how things remained, but definitely in the early days, it was kind of a big thing because I saw people like Pat Flynn of Smart Passive Income, pretty known guy in the podcasting and blogging space or passive income kind of space. He disrupted the market because so many people were hiding. Like they would have maybe a internet pseudonym, or they wouldn't show their picture, or they would say, I got these amazing results, but not really back up or qualify anything. Pat Flynn came along, disrupted the whole thing, and said, I'm actually going to show you everything. All the ways I've screwed up, you know, things that worked, things that didn't work. Here's what I'm actually making. And eventually, like Pat got huge. So he makes tons and tons of income. I don't even know what it is at this point, but like, he got to the point relatively quickly to where he's making six figures and beyond in affiliate commissions and his own products and all that kind of stuff. But I think I was inspired by that. I was inspired by, and there were other entrepreneurs too that came along around that time that were part of this whole transparent movement. And then people started kind of noticing it more, not just for Pat, but all the other people who've decided to kind of share their experience and their journey in the same way. And so I think I was among one of those people that was simply inspired by Pat.
That's cool. You got me thinking about Howard Stern. I don't know if you're
Oh yeah,
a fan, but
totally.
he's always been very transparent. You know, most people think of him as the shock jock, but I think people stick with him because, he talks about his parents and growing up and, everything that was really hard for all his obstacles in life. He shares and puts out on the table and gets really personal. So I think, that is why he's so big.
Yeah, his story and his movie Private Parts, I think it was,
Yeah.
played no small part in influencing me in certain ways as well. I couldn't help but feel a little bit of a connection. Like I'm expressing myself, like that was part of his early journey, right? It's like I'm expressing myself, but I'm not fully expressed. I really want to like dig in and show people who I am. And get all my crazy thoughts out into the world, and that's how Howard Stern really became Howard Stern. So I couldn't help but kind of relate to that.
Yeah, nice. Um, so I was wondering also, you were talking about, I think your the middle book, which is kind of more like your
This one?
health and kind of journey and how your happiness relates to everything else that you do. You want to
Yeah,
talk more about that? Because that will speak more to the people of this group, because we're all about, health and happiness. So could you add a
yeah,
little bit more about that?
yeah. I mean, there's a few different things I could take there, but I think what I'll do is kind of take you back to after my father passed away, we moved back to Canada. That has certain implications already because I used to live in Japan, and the food quality in Japan, and I'm speaking in very general terms, but the food quality in Japan is actually very good. You eat at the average restaurant, you're not getting all the pesticides and herbicides and toxins. Canada is a different story. So probably within a year of moving back, I gained quite a bit of weight, you know. People have said freshman 10 or whatever. I mean, I was still growing too, but like, that sort of started to impact my health a little bit. And I couldn't really, as much as I had the desire to kind of keep that weight off and exercise and be active, because I loved basketball and I loved baseball and I loved soccer. So I loved getting outdoors, and that was much harder to do in Canada too, because it's like winter, especially Calgary. It's like winter 10 months of the year. I mean, not quite exaggerate, but still. So even like I would walk to school, but outside of that, like how much exercise would you really realistically get outside of maybe gym class, right? So in my 20s, I suffered a panic attack, and then following that was like migraines and stuff like that. And I couldn't figure it out. I didn't know what's going on, but I went to a doctor one time, I remember, and asked him about migraines, and he was just like, "Oh, just take this pill." I'm like, "Huh? When do I take it?" He's like, "As soon as you notice symptoms." And I don't know, something was off about it for me. Now, it's like I don't have a complete mistrust of the Western medical system. I don't have a complete mistrust of the pharmaceutical system. I do tend to not touch it unless I absolutely have to. But for me, it didn't resonate. And so thus began a journey. And it really took a while to understand, but through my own research in a way, looking into books, looking into different things, I figured out I had a reaction to aspartame. And then over time, I realized it wasn't just aspartame, it was other artificial sweeteners. At first, I reacted maybe only to aspartame, but in time, others caused problems as well, stuff like sucralose. But I mean, that in itself was a pretty big victory in my life because then I wasn't getting these headaches so much. And that meant that I could feel better in my own body more of the time. And there's been many other adjustments and breakthroughs since, but I have a pretty in-depth stack of supplements that I take now. I celery juice almost every day. For lunch, I usually try to like juice some cilantro or some parsley. I eat lots of fresh fruits. I do eat meat, yes, but proteins are important. Yeah, so that's led to a lot of adjustments, especially since like 2017 when I decided to start taking working out a little more seriously. From there, it's like all kinds of gradual but really meaningful adjustments that have helped me on my health journey.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just talking in another group, and we were talking about something similar. It's really funny how Western medicine focuses on helping you live with your current condition. So if you
Yeah,
have migraines, they help, instead of actually getting to the root cause of it, they just figure out how you can live with it,
yeah,
right? Which doesn't
so
make any
true.
sense. So um, I think the newest health movement needs to be, let's get to the root cause and let's start getting into preventative health instead of, just working with living with what we already have.
That absolutely made more sense to me. Yeah, get to the root cause.
Yeah, yeah, really cool. I don't want to take too much of your time. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about that we didn't get to talk about today?
Well, Derek, I just really appreciate the opportunity to be able to share, and I hope any part of my journey, including my health journey, helps people. There, at the end of the day, we could talk for hours. There's just so much I could get into, stories I could tell, and experiences I could share, and projects I've done. But I think this has been a nice little self-contained slice.
Okay.
So yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
So anyone in this group, I mean, I'm sure lots of people are into art or music or something that they do that they want to maybe try to make some money with, you
Hmm.
know? What advice would you have for them in order to do that?
Mm. Well, it certainly depends on the type of art that you're doing. It certainly depends on at what level you're hoping to make a go of it. I think what happens so often is kind of what Earl Nightingale talked about, right? Like if there's a mass movement happening, everybody just kind of unconsciously follows without really thinking about like, well, if everyone's going that way, I might actually want to go this way. Where everyone's zigging, I might want to zag. It's actually often a better strategy for most things. So in the music industry, the example is, well, you can't make money with recorded music, which by the way, not true. So let's just go out and gig and grind it out. But the funny thing about gigging is, and some cities are different than others, definitely. When I was in Calgary, I could pretty well count on making 50 to 150 bucks and sometimes beyond, depending on the type of gig. Whereas Vancouver, Vancouver Island, etc. So far, yeah, I've actually had a really great gig and it was for like a private party. So that was paid and I got tips and I got treated very well and food and drinks and the whole works. That worked out very well. But I think if you're going to go and perform in the average venue, you might have to pay to play in Vancouver, in Greater Victoria area, or just play it for free. And so that makes the whole gigging thing a pretty massive challenge. So I think at the end of the day, it's just really thinking about like how am I going to zig when others zagging. So in music, you could think of like a one thing that I had success with. I put on a live event in Victoria. The event itself wasn't like a runaway success, but it was okay. But one thing I had a success with is actually selling my music. And again, that's something most people say impossible. This happened just last year. And the way I did that was by bundling it up with other products. So people weren't just getting the CD and the digital download, which, if you're a fan, you're going to pay for. But if you make it an irresistible offer, it's like, oh, you get this course and you get this book and you get tickets to our next event. All of a sudden, the value starts to stack. So I think figuring out the importance of like a value stack can make a big difference for most artists. Anything people say you can't sell, if they say you can't sell a book or you can't sell uh, your music or you can't sell any creative project, your painting or your drawings, if you bundle it up with enough attractive things, you can still move copies. So,
Yeah, that's great advice. And I was thinking about, as you're saying that, I heard recently, I don't remember the name of the scientist, but he said any scientist that's following other people's rules is never going to make a big discovery, right? So
yeah,
I think it's the same thing with anything that you do. If you keep doing what everybody else is doing, you're just like everybody else. You're never going to make anything really happen, right? So, uh,
yeah. Well said. And I think in the scientific field, there's a lot of reasons why that would definitely be true because there's a lot of stuff out there. And I get it, like scientific theory is subjected to a lot of scrutiny by outside sources and a lot of people, but it's still called theory for a reason. And so if you start wrapping your head around the fact that this this might not be like concrete, solid fact, you can start to discover things that you didn't know were there.
yeah, yeah. Really great stuff. Thank you for being here. Any last words of wisdom or advice for people?
I think one great practice everyone can adopt is spending the first hour of your day working on your highest priority task. And if you do that, you're going to be miles ahead of most people because reality is your highest value task tends to be the thing you procrastinate on most. Might be your next album, might be writing a book, might be finding your spouse, whatever it is. Whatever it is that is actually important to you, but you procrastinate on most is usually your highest priority. And if you spend an hour per day, first thing, you'll be productive like few others can be.
I love that. That's amazing. Well, it was really great talking to you. Thank you so much. I'm going to have you share all your links in the comments. So if anybody that's watching this, whether you're here live with us or you're watching the replay, if you have questions, comments, feedback, you can put them in the comments and David or I will respond to you. And we're going to get all the links, all his books and his Facebook group and everything that he wants to share will definitely be in the comments. And we thank you again for being here. And thanks everybody for watching. If you enjoyed this and you'd like to be spotlighted here in Nourish, Heal, and Thrive, you can also comment interview and we're gonna get a hold of you and we'll set something up. So thank you everybody and we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you.
Bye.